Once again, we were not going to bring the super heavy booster back to the tower. We were planning on having it land in the Gulf.
Starship Flight 12 was still a major achievement for SpaceX, but the mission also revealed several issues on both the booster and the ship. In fact, some of those problems started appearing just minutes after the rocket left the pad. So today we're going to take a closer look at those issues, try to figure out what may have caused them, and explore what they could mean for SpaceX moving forward. First, we need to talk about the engine issue. During ascent, one of the outer Raptor 3 engines shut down early, just before T+2 minutes. Then came hot staging, the part where Starship's 6 upper stage Raptors ignite while the booster is still attached. Right after separation, the booster flipped much faster than we've seen on previous flights, and that may have caused problems almost immediately. Usually the booster performs a controlled vertical flip, but on Flight 12, it suddenly rolled sideways instead, almost like it lost balance. When it was time for the boostback burn, only 5 Raptor engines managed to relight, and all of them were from the middle ring. Since the burn didn't go as planned, the onboard computer determined that the booster could no longer safely return closer to shore in the Gulf. Instead of attempting a risky recovery, it stayed on its current trajectory and continued falling toward the ocean. There are a few theories about what caused this. One idea is that the extremely aggressive flip maneuver after stage separation caused fuel sloshing inside the tanks. Rockets carry huge amounts of liquid fuel and oxygen. When a rocket suddenly rotates in an unexpected way, all that propellant can slosh violently inside the tanks. Imagine carrying a bucket of water and suddenly jerking it sideways. The liquid moves unpredictably. Inside a rocket, it can temporarily starve engines of fuel or feed them bubbles of gas instead of liquid propellant. We've actually seen similar issues on earlier Starship flights, so this could simply be a known problem showing up again rather than a completely new failure. Another theory is that the relight sequence itself went wrong. Some people think the inner engines may have restarted normally at first, but when the outer 20 engines began igniting, one engine could have failed violently and forced nearby engines to shut down as a safety precaution. Some attention has also been given to the new V3 downcomer design. The downcomer is the massive internal pipe that carries methane fuel through the booster, and on V3 it's much larger than before. Some speculate that this bigger structure could create more complicated fuel movement during the flip maneuver. If liquid methane briefly moved away from the engine inlets, the engines may have sucked in gas instead of liquid fuel, which would automatically trigger shutdowns to protect the engines from damage. Even after all that, the booster was not completely dead. It still managed to stabilize itself during descent using the grid fins. It actually attempted a landing burn later, which is pretty impressive considering how damaged it probably was. But by then, too many engines were gone, and one engine simply was not enough to slow the booster down safely. Luckily for SpaceX, they weren't planning to catch this booster with the launch tower's chopstick arms yet. Instead, the goal was to first test a water landing with the new rocket before attempting a full return to the launch site. Meanwhile, the upper stage actually performed much better overall, although it still ran into a few issues. About 3 minutes into the flight, the ship lost one of its RVac engines. That immediately caught people's attention because observers noticed the nozzle glowing bright red, and there also appeared to be gas venting or leaking from the engine area. Many people were especially worried because previous RVac failures on earlier V2 Starships had ended in catastrophic explosions. This time, though, whatever isolation or protection upgrades SpaceX added seemed to have worked. The engine failure stayed contained and did not spread to the rest of the vehicle. Even after losing the RVac, Starship kept flying normally, using its remaining 5 engines, 3 sea-level Raptors, and 2 vacuum Raptors. The flight computer must have automatically adjusted the remaining engines to compensate for the lost thrust. You can actually see the engines gimbaling, or moving their direction slightly, to keep the spacecraft balanced and pointed correctly. Aside from that single engine shutdown, the ship completed most of its major objectives successfully. Payload deployment appeared to go smoothly, splashdown looked successful, and the re-entry footage was some of the best we've seen so far. A lot of people were especially impressed that the ship could continue operating almost normally after losing one of its vacuum engines. That's a big deal because it shows Starship may already have real engine-out capability, meaning it can survive an engine failure and still complete most of the mission. At the same time, the longer ascent burn caused by the RVac shutdown likely used extra propellant and reduced the safety margin later in the flight. Because of that, the guidance system may have decided that saving enough fuel for re-entry and splashdown was more important than attempting the planned engine relight test. In the end, SpaceX chose to skip the Raptor relight demonstration on Ship 39, which means Starship will probably need at least one more suborbital test flight before moving on to more advanced mission goals. We also have to mention the issue from the first May 21st attempt. The countdown made it all the way to the final 40 seconds before liftoff, T40 seconds. But the launch ran into several holds and auto aborts along the way. After roughly 5 holds, SpaceX officially scrubbed the attempt. The issue was traced to a hydraulic locking pin on the launch tower's chopsticks, also known as the Mechazilla arm. The pin failed to retract properly, preventing the Ship Quick Disconnect, SQD, arm from moving as intended. That arm supplies the upper stage ship with propellant power data and other support right up until launch. Elon Musk later confirmed the problem, saying the hydraulic pin holding the tower arm in place did not retract. Teams then worked overnight to troubleshoot and fix the issue. So what do all these issues actually mean? A lot of people are looking at these setbacks and debating whether the program is really moving fast enough, especially now that more engine-related problems have appeared. For the booster, the bright side is that B-19 was still able to fall on a ballistic trajectory after the failed boostback burn, which let teams gather valuable data on booster re-entry and grid fin guidance. SpaceX mainly wanted data on atmospheric entry and guidance systems, and since a ballistic trajectory was already built into the mission's acceptance criteria, they still got a solid amount of useful information from the flight. The downside, though, is that B-19 wasn't able to complete the bigger stretch goals, including a successful boostback burn, landing burn, and accurate splashdown in the Gulf. That also means Booster 20 will likely have to be expended on the next flight to keep testing those objectives before SpaceX can finally attempt another tower catch at Starbase. As I mentioned earlier, even by Flight 13, Starship still might not achieve a fully operational orbit due to the lack of relight demonstrations this time. SpaceX also hasn't shared a timeline yet for the next Starship launch, or when the company expects to attempt its first true orbital mission after 12 suborbital test flights. In a prospectus filed with the Securities and Exchange Commission on May 20th, ahead of its IPO, the company said it expected Starship to begin orbital payload delivery missions sometime in the second half of this year. As for the booster, the Federal Aviation Administration said after the flight that it was still assessing the anomaly that happened during the boostback burn. The agency added that it had not yet decided whether the issue qualifies as a mishap that would require a formal investigation. The FAA also said it activated a debris response area after the anomaly and confirmed the booster fell within that designated zone. On the other hand, the vehicle appeared to complete most of its planned test objectives during the flight. The first test of the version 3 design, SpaceX introduced major upgrades to both the Super Heavy booster and the Starship upper stage, and even built a new launch pad at Starbase for the vehicle. Starship and Super Heavy both have engine-out capability, meaning they can still continue the mission even if one of the engines shuts down early. Another big win was the heat shield, which many people consider one of the hardest engineering challenges in the entire program. On this flight, it performed better than many expected. After the mission, Elon Musk said the Starship V3 heat shield held well, which has to be reassuring for SpaceX as it works toward fully recovering and rapidly reusing future ships. There was also good news on the ground. Initial inspections of SpaceX's brand new launch pad at Starbase, which was used for the first time on Flight 12, showed that it handled the power of liftoff with no major issues. That's a huge sign that the upgrades are working as intended. Pad 2 was specifically designed for full and rapid reusability, with a much larger propellant farm and more pumps to allow faster fueling and quicker turnaround between launches. The tower itself also received major upgrades. SpaceX replaced the older chopsticks with shorter ones that can move much faster and better track vehicles coming in for a catch. The actuators powering them were also switched from hydraulic systems to fully electromechanical ones, improving speed, reliability, and redundancy. On the ground side, the launch mount was completely redesigned to be far more durable. With all the steel cladding and reinforced concrete, it almost looks more like a battleship than a launch pad. The fuel and oxygen systems were separated into different compartments for added safety, and the booster quick disconnects were repositioned so they stay out of the engine plume during liftoff. Perhaps the most noticeable change was the brand new bidirectional flame diverter. SpaceX officially retired the old pancake-style system and replaced it with a new flame trench and top-deck deflector designed to reduce metal erosion and help move closer to zero refurbishment between launches. Overall, Flight 12 was a very promising sign, not just for Starbase, but also for SpaceX's future launch pads at Cape Canaveral, which are expected to use this new pad design as their template. These upgrades are meant to improve the performance and reliability of Starship V3, which SpaceX plans to use for future orbital missions, including Starlink satellite deployments and the Artemis lunar lander program being developed for NASA. Among those watching the launch at Starbase was NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman, who said, "I know a lot of hard work leads up to a moment like this, so we're all rooting for you, and we're looking forward to meeting up next year in Earth orbit." Even Elon Musk seemed pleased with the result, posting on X afterward, "It was a very good day." Do you know that more than 90% of viewers watching still haven't subscribed yet? So, if you're enjoying the videos, don't be shy. Hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and motivates me to keep bringing you more awesome content about spaceflight. Thanks for the support.